Hi guys, welcome to the Improvement Season podcast. I am Steve Hall and over there is Pascal Floor. How are you doing, Pascal?
Yeah, buddy, I'm a little bit tired from the weekend in London. I don't know what it is about traveling, but it always beats me up so much. And it's not even that it's so stressful being in London, especially the seminar. I mean, we went there, were super relaxed, just sat down, listened a little bit to Broderick talk. Then going back to the hotel room, going to our Christmas get-together, and then leave again. It wasn't really too exhausting when you look at it that way, but came back home super exhausted. And ever since that, then I'm just a little bit under the weather, so to speak.
I think traveling is an interesting one. I think if you normally, at least when I go traveling, I'm like trying to, if it's holiday, try and do it in a way that I maximize my time on holiday and kind of do it at the like cheapest times in terms of flights, which normally means that you end up like crushing sleep in some way. And so you always sacrifice sleep. So I don't know what and then you're sleeping, depending on the time difference. Obviously here it's not too bad, but you might not sleep as well.
Yeah.
I bet you didn't have as much sleep on that Friday and Saturday.
No, so the hotel room was alright, but I didn't really sleep that well for 2 days in a row. But Katie did so as well, because Hugo, he is a big kid. He's not fat or so, but he's just like, because Katie is actually pretty tall, and her father is like 195 or so. So I would expect that Hugo's getting massive at some point. And for his age, he's already quite tall. But when he's lying in bed, and this time around he was lying in bed together with us, he's just like taking up the entire space. It's just like, it is cute to look at, but when you want to sleep yourself, I mean, he gets in your way, kind of, right? You just wake up with a foot in your mouth or so.
I struggle enough already with just Charlotte in my bed. I'm just like, you're over my side. Come on. So having a child.
We are not used to having Hugo in our bed. So I don't know what it is, but subtly in your, or subconsciously, you're just taking care of that child as well. You don't want to roll over, and you're half awake the entire time, and that's what it felt like for both of us. So yeah, that's probably a huge contributor to the thing.
I'd feel like I was gonna like elbow or knee him in the face and be like, no, I can't move, stop it. Exactly.
I mean, you hear from people that they are rolling over the child and actually
Actually, I think I know you're reading Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, and in there he talks about why you sleep worse in different locations, because the body's kind of like and that half of its brain is like awake to try and protect you because it doesn't know it's safe, which is the human body in so many ways is incredibly smart, and at the same time it's like, could you not be so smart, just like dumb down, because you're being like, you're being dumb, like you're so smart you're being dumb in this scenario. So yeah, I'm not surprised you're tired. And I was saying how on, I think it was, Monday, I was feeling pretty damn exhausted from the weekend, which is strange. I think it's just because, and I actually, me and Pascal both did this test, which kind of goes through what type of person you are. It's like a personality test. And on that, I think I came out at like 90% introverted, which is hilarious and quite true in many ways, in that when I always find that people and hanging out with a lot of people and being attentive drains me. I mean, I love it. It's great, but I need to then kind of scurry away to my corner and be on my own for a bit to recharge. And so, yeah, obviously we had our Revive team meetup, dinner, and then training the next morning. And Broderick was over for Saturday doing his presentation, his seminar, which was really cool to see him in person. He is just like you'd expect him to be. Really nice guy and hilarious and hates naturals. He did pick on me a little bit.
So I'm always wondering, I would assume that people in Hollywood and really famous individuals, I know that many of them have an image coach at their side, right? Who teaches them how to behave in public, how to actually get into a certain role, and how to sell yourself, right? So that you're a certain character. And I have the feeling that, and it could be super wrong, but I've talked to Broderick in person, off air. You did so as well. And I have the feeling that he's actually playing a little bit of a role when he's presenting or talking on the podcast, because he's actually quite an intelligent guy. And I think that he, of course, realizes how people react to the way he's acting. And many people do like when he's getting super furious about something, right? And yeah, that was what Broderick was like. And yeah, I'm not entirely certain whether that is an intentional act or that's truly how he actually is.
Yeah, I think you're right. When you talk to him, he's a bit more chilled out. Like, he's not as hyped. I can't remember what podcast I did with him once, but I was like, whoa, like Broderick's on one right now. He must have just taken had a big cup of coffee because he was going wild. But I think you're right. Like, when people respond in a certain way, he's like, right, I'll use that, because it does give him a bit of a difference about him, because I think it's a good way to market yourself a little bit, is to have that thing that's a bit different about you. So yeah, we had that this weekend. And then Pascal, you've just started your primer phase, right? And you were just saying how squats and deadlifts are reintroduced both at the same time, and they're crushing you a little bit.
Yeah, so I was a little bit cautious with the squats because of my knee. But when I'm approaching the squat and I'm properly warming up, then everything is actually feeling all right. So nothing to worry about there. But squats and deadlifts, mate, I haven't squatted and deadlift for a while now, and I'm so fucking weak. That is actually embarrassing. So I'm in the gym, and every single time I've squatted and deadlifted or deadlifted, I'm leaving the gym and I'm just super frustrated. It's the first week, so I came from a metabolite block where you're used to doing high repetition work, lots of volume, yada, yada, yada. Now you're doing lower repetition kind of work. Of course, you're not primed for that type of training, but it's just like super frustrating. And you always have to keep in mind that I lost like 10 to 12 kilograms ever since I squatted and deadlifted the last time. So that's a huge drop in body weight. But still, super frustrating. But yeah, deadlifts. So when it comes to squats and deadlifts, we talked about it off air, and I think that it is a good thing to bring up. And I think that both of us, we've talked about it in the past already, that there's just something about squats and deadlifts that no other exercise gives you. I can't really explain why, but it's just like, there's something else there going on, and it works the muscles just to a different extent, and I seriously can't explain it, but there's just something to these exercises, to these heavy compound lifts.
Yeah, I think, it is a great thing to bring up, because in the internet age now, and with and I'm definitely getting a little bit sucked into it with all the resistance profiles, making it like a better resistance profile, a smoother resistance profile of this, the different gadgets like cable attachments, all the different machines that are coming out that look really cool. And I definitely think they're great things, but I think sometimes for me, you can end up overemphasizing them. And I think early in your lifting career, especially for a lot of us guys who are listening to this and we're not very, very advanced, we're not super strong, I think that can be to our detriment at times. And like we were saying, there's something about a squat that from both me and Pascal wrecks our quads like nothing else. I could do 5 sets of hack squats versus 5 sets of squats. The 5 sets of squats are going to completely destroy me. There's just something that disrupts homeostasis, something that has some sort of hypertrophic response just because you're doing that movement for some reason for us. But like you said off air, you're it's just a case of individualization in a way, mind muscle connection, what exercises work really well for you, and for us those work very well for us. And what was I going to say? I don't know what I was going to say. I can't remember what I was going to say. I
can jump in there because, you brought up a great point, because hack squats are quite similar to squatting in for itself. But whenever I reintroduce hack squats, I get a little bit sore, right? While still the relative intensity was maybe the same as with the squats just give me so much in return. And I'm not just speaking systemic fatigue, but more so really my quads are just destroyed, right? And that alone from 2 sets or so. While the relative intensity, once again, may be very well be the same, right? I don't know. I seriously can't explain why that might be the case. I don't think that the stabilization part plays such a tremendous role that this may explain all of it, maybe a little bit, but not really a lot of it. But there's just something I seriously can't explain, but you don't always have to be able to explain things. It's always good to strive for explanations, right? We always want to get closer to the truth. But every once in a while, it is absolutely all right to be a little bit of a bro still. Like, okay, I do feel that exercise better, and that's why I'm doing it. Fair enough.
This is hilarious because I think this is going to be like, I think a lot of people look at us and Revive Stronger as very like evidence-based, everything must be supported. We're very like science more so than like anecdote. And I don't like to think that people have that view of us. I can understand why they might. I think we're a bit more evidence-based and neutral than that. But this is one of those areas where I'm definitely like, I don't have there's no data to back this up. It's pure personal anecdote. And then when you look at the biggest guys, they've all built their physiques off big, basic movements. And so that's where I'm throwing out, that's as bro-y as we basically get. Which I think is cool. And it's cool that we've both come to that conclusion. It's fine. And I'm open to being, and I'm sure I know you are, to being disproven or kind of corrected on that. But it's surely interesting when I know there'll be more research on this sort of thing coming out in future.
Totally.
So that's our weeks. Obviously, I've just got back into my new mesocycle today, and I had squats, which was awesome. Really enjoyed today's session. So I'm super happy to be back into my routine of like, it's really funny because we've talked about this many a time on the podcast, so I won't talk too much, but the psychological element. So I was getting really worn out from AM, PM sessions, following my meals, really structured, being really on top of it. And then I have a week where I have freedom and I like my meals. I was just so lazy. I was just eating loads of oatmeal basically because I was like, I can't be asked to cook. So I'm just going to throw oats in the microwave. I can't get away with having that many oats now because the fiber would go way too high. And actually,
where are you sitting at right now in regards to calories?
I am going to push back up to, I think I don't know why I do it really, but my leg days will go to like 3,800. My upper body days will be 3,700.
Calorie cycling. Listen to that, guys.
On my rest days, I go to 2,000 and I go keto.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm fasting 24 hours.
Yeah, I was going to say, I just fast on my rest day. I don't eat. Man, I think that would massively hamper your recovery. Wouldn't it? But,
yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, maybe a small calorie cycle, and I just have a little bit more in my, again, me being a bro, my intra-workout shake. Well, I do train twice per day, so it's a little bit more applicable. And we did go over that heavily last time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited to be back into that structure. I think I feel more productive because I'm like, I know I'm busy there. So I've got this chunk of work to do here, this chunk of work here. So I'm really loving getting back into that. So yeah, really good stuff. And then it will lead into Christmas and everything. And I think fortunately for me, because if I go home for Christmas, which I probably will, the gym I think is open. Like maybe, I don't know if it's even open on Christmas Day because it's like a 24-hour gym. I haven't checked. But there's one in Luton, which is like, I don't know, drive away. So
cool. Like, how many gyms are there around in UK from that franchise?
The gym is like one of the biggest. I think the gym and Pure Gym, there's loads, but there's the gym in Luton, which is like one stop on the train away from me. So it's like a 20-minute drive. So that's quite nice.
Yeah.
So should we get into questions?
Yeah, if we have enough questions, then let's dive into things.
Otherwise, we can just bullshit for longer. I reckon we have enough questions. So we had... Do we want to start with Sean? He had a second question.
Yeah, let's start with him.
So Sean asked, as a beginner, if you are seeing session or weekly increases in reps and or weight, would you keep volume static? And also, are deloads still necessary as a beginner at this stage of progression, if not overreaching? So split that into two questions, really. Any thoughts on the first one first, Pascal?
Yeah, so I think that when things are going well now, so automatically when we're talking about volume, we first have to define what you mean with the volume. Most of the time, people are referring to total tonnage, so sets times reps times load, and this is what I'm going to refer to now as well. So when you're talking about keeping reps and load the same, then progressing via volume, he asked, right? Or keeping volume the same.
So he's saying, I think he's talking about volume in terms of number of sets, because he said keep volume static and increases in reps and or weight. So I think he's keeping it like 3 sets or increasing, and then increasing like 10, 11 reps, 12 reps, or 100 kilos, 102, 105.
Absolutely feasible, I think. And especially when you are more so a novice or early intermediate or so, I think that progressing via load is probably the best way to go about things. It's like what we've discussed in the past about the deadlifts and the squat, keeping them in to actually make you stronger. Up to a certain point, strength is probably a good idea for bodybuilders. When you are hitting your, I don't know, kind of a limit, right? And you're getting to loads that are truly, truly disruptive for your body, then progressing via load, like necessarily, or forcing that progression may not be the best thing, but until a certain threshold of resistance, I think that progressing via load is definitely the way to go for early intermediates and novices. And then the more advanced you get, the more load you can use, the less important I think load becomes on the bar. And the more important it becomes, like progressing probably via set numbers.
Yeah, I think you're right, because when you're, well, what is it? The guys from Super Training say, Vokolsky or whatever his name is, I can't remember, but he's like...
Ben Pakulski or?
No, from Super Training, the massive book on programming. I can't think of Voskowski or something, some crazy name. They always talk about basically like anything works for a beginner or a novice. And when we think about in terms of volume landmarks, their minimum effective volume is so small. So if you're just doing a decent amount of volume and you're able to progress with it, like just go for it. And I think at that stage, like you're saying, strength and those like big movements, the hypertrophic stimulus to fatigue ratio is so in your favor, and you want to push that. And then I think when you get to a point where actually a couple of sets of those starts beating you up, that's when you realize, okay, now it's not so good chasing that, and I have to kind of refigure out how I'm going to do things. And so no, I think that was great.
I think that actually leads directly into the second question then, or the second part of the question about the deloads. And I don't necessarily think that many novices need to deload on a frequent basis, because it's like you said, they are recovering probably so quickly from each and every single session because they don't have the ability to metabolically disrupt themselves so much, right? That they can probably push for a very long time before a true deload is necessary or needed. And I would more so take it a little bit. So I'm not the biggest proponent of reactive deloads. I think, yes, you can extend a mesocycle or so by 1 or 2 weeks and then take a deload. But I think always having a planned deload is most of the time the best choice. But when it comes to novices, I think that there is a really good case for them, or a really good argument to make for them to do or implement reactive deloads. Take it as it comes, push as long as you can until you're then truly needing it.
Yeah, I think I think that I agree with that, and I'd only cover this question by saying we're assuming he's talking about hypertrophy.
Yeah.
Because obviously it depends on your goal. Like, what was your goal in here for the first question at least? But for hypertrophy, I think that makes sense. And then for deloads, like they probably don't really need to think about it when they're that new, because it's going to be so long until they get to a point where it's applicable or appropriate. And then they're probably going to have holidays, Christmas comes, few days off. Like they'll probably end up deloading, and it's like it'll be something that you wouldn't need to plan in. It's just something that will happen, and you take it when you need it. And then overreaching, I think we probably both agree that they don't need to push that point where they're really kind of getting to like really overreaching. It's just not something that's required. When we're thinking about like a stress response, they don't need that amount of stress to produce the response that they want. It's just not a requirement.
Yeah, and when we keep in mind that periodization, it's not even entirely clear whether we need that for something like bodybuilding to truly make some gains or so. And that's why something like a deload is always questionable in that regard as well, because periodization came from Olympic weightlifting and stuff like that, or just generous sports, right? And then it just carried over to bodybuilding. But it's so far still not clear whether this is actually really necessary. I think it's only my opinion that it's probably a good idea to have some kind of a periodized approach, but whether this is truly necessary is still unclear.
Cool. Next question is from Dully. What a great name, Dully. They have asked, what are your considerations for improving quad development for someone who hates to squat? Oh no, Dully, we just talked about how much we love squats.
Yeah, we had that one.
Oh, have we already covered that one?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Right. Abdullah said, what are your recommendations for temporarily reducing training volume during periods of high stress? For example, 2 weeks prior to an important exam, while still trying to maintain your program. For example, would it be worth taking a set off each exercise to maintain temporarily?
Go ahead, mate.
So, absolutely. I don't think that's a problem at all. To maintenance volume is pitifully low. Like, you can really get away with low volume to maintain, especially like assuming you're not dieting, things like this. So if you do want to just, for a couple of weeks, just go to the gym, kind of go through the motions essentially, absolutely fine. I see no problems with that. I can't think of anything that glaringly is like, you shouldn't do that. I think that sounds like a smart approach.
No, and one more thing that you brought up actually during that week, when it comes to deload and cutting it short or considering that at least, you said like, hey, the time flies by so quickly, it's over quicker than you expected it to be, right? And probably that's the case in that situation as well. If you are really stressing about not getting in the training sessions, you will be surprised how quickly that time just flies by, especially because you will probably be quite busy because of that stressful period. And in the end, you will only... let me just think of my phrasing there. Yeah, I think that you will only benefit from that.
Yeah, and in terms of how much you could probably reduce by, I'd probably say something like 40% reduction in how much the workload you're doing. So from 100% to 60% is probably fine, I would imagine.
Yeah,
especially that shorter period of time, 2 weeks.
Totally.
Like, you could probably not even train for 2 weeks. You're not really going to see much.
That's what I wanted just to bring up there, that you could probably get away with not training at all. That you wouldn't see any kind of detriments with that outcome.
Just be harder coming out of it. Like,
yeah.
You then have to have a bit, like, you'd have to recycle yourself, have what are they called? Intro weeks, kind of really introduce yourself.
And fuck, mate, you would get so sore after coming back from 2 weeks not training.
So Ivan has asked, just wondering about volume. We lift on first meso after a deload week. On the last mesocycle, I've hit 0 RAR on compound lifts. If we aim to get 3 to 4 reps in reserve on first mesocycle, won't the volume come down? This is such a common question. Or are we supposed to do another set? Or do you have any other recommendations? Thanks in advance. I'm currently massing. So I don't know if that was completely clear.
No, it wasn't. Can you maybe... Yeah,
I'll try and explain it. So for example, say just give it to the squat in a mesocycle. At the moment, I'm at 2 sets. Then maybe I go and 2 sets at like 3 to 4 reps in reserve. By the end of my mesocycle, maybe I'm at 4 sets at 0 reps in reserve. Deload, come back. And he's like, so do you need to do, like, you're back at 3 to 4 reps in reserve. How many sets do you do? Because surely progressive overload means you have to beat that week 4. And obviously that's my MRV. So you can't come back into MRV. And it's kind of like, well, there's that kind of misconnection.
Yeah, that's the common misconception we've talked about in the past, about the understanding of what progressive overload actually means and what that entails as well. Only because you've done one thing doesn't mean that the other things don't work anymore. So just because you've done 4 sets of squats for an RAR of 0 doesn't mean that this is now your baseline you have to go from, right? So with the cycling back, and especially the deload, it's just like you're bringing fatigue levels down, your fitness is then probably higher. You can Probably use a little bit more load. Yes, it isn't as challenging as week 4, but still you're providing the body with a progressive overloading stimulus and with a sufficient intensity along with that allows you to grow along the way. And then you are accumulating stress and volume over the mesocycle again. And over the time span of that entire mesocycle, you have done more than the previous mesocycle, hopefully.
Yeah, I think there's that was really well explained. And I'd only add that I think people forget that there's a window of overload and then a window of progressive overload, I guess, from there. And that you only that's why it's called minimum effective up to maximal recoverable, because your minimum effective is the least amount of intensity, the least amount of volume that you need to produce growth. And by taking the deload, you're then kind of recycling back to MEV to then progress upwards from there. So I always say to people, compare like for like weeks. So compare week 1 of this mesocycle to week 1 of your past mesocycle. Don't try and compare week 4 to the first week. It's just not an appropriate kind of comparison.
Yeah, and once again, just to once again state that just because it's MEV or so, or call it whatever you want, right? You're still training. You're still providing the body with a stimulus that is unnatural to what you are used to do on a day-to-day basis normally, right? You're not going around and squat your way through life, right? And because of that, it still provides the body with a stress. And that stress is the reason why you're adapting to something, right? And if the stress is high enough, then you will adapt. And probably because you're cycling back there and it is your MEV, let's say, at the beginning of the mesocycle, you're still providing the body with a sufficient intensity or stimulus to actually spurt some growth. And the rest that you are putting on top of that will probably be a little bit 1% more, if at all, right? So you're covering most of your gains already from this beginning of the mesocycle, and everything you're putting on top there is just a marginal increase.
Yeah, I think, like you said, the best gains are made in the weeks between MEV to MRV. So just start low and build up. And in some cases, you might not even start with more in that first week versus the other week. You might start on the same weight, same reps, same sets, just because you might not have it improved. It might take you might be that advanced that it takes you several mesocycles to see an improvement in performance. Because I think a lot of people are do I have to increase weight? And I'm just well, if you got stronger, you might not have got stronger. You might have improved technique. There's loads of things that could have happened. But like Pascal said, it's not that overload, once you've done it, no longer ever provides overload. It's still something that will provide overload.
God, that would suck, actually. Yeah. God.
Imagine that. Eventually it won't, but it will take a long time.
Just imagine you always have to do more each and every single time. Once you've done more, you can't ever go back again. You always have to do more and more and more. And especially for the crowd of always doing high volume, they could never ever go below something like 50 sets per body part now anymore, right?
People get so scared by that. That's what it's funny. I recently had a consultation with a monthly client of mine, and we'd been prioritizing quads, and he'd taken his set numbers all the way to 26 sets in his final week for quads. He's doing squats, hack squats, leg press, and leg extensions. So majority of the sets didn't come from just squats, which would be crazy. But his hamstrings also were capped at 10 sets, and he was only doing leg curls. So this just a context, so everyone doesn't start doing 26 sets in there. And this was in the final week. So he started off at his MEV, and we pushed up to MRV for his quads. And he was like, he was a question he had during our consultation. He was like, am I now going to always have to push to this 26 sets? And I was like, if you want maximal quad development, then we will probably want to push up to that amount, in a mesocycle, but that's MRV, remember. We still have MEV, and you can still move through maximal adaptive volume. If we want to progress your quads, you don't have to always push up to 26 sets for growth. Absolutely not. If we want maximal progress, potentially. But yeah, I just thought that might be interesting.
Yeah. And his technique, is it always flawless and stuff like that? Or do you still think that there's room for improvement?
I think I have to accept that it's flawless, only because in our consultation I was like, do you want to drop in some form videos in our group? And you may well listen to this. So Chris, if you listen to this, if you heard Pascal what he said there, and you're like, oh, maybe my form isn't flawless, then maybe get those videos. But yeah, he's an experienced lifter. He knows his technique and stuff. So he pushes hard. The only thing I did notice actually, and I brought this up with him, was on his machine movements in the final week. His first set repetitions got quite high compared to the first week of the mesocycle with more load. So I was like, maybe your relative intensities weren't quite where they should have been in the first week. So that's a correction that we're making.
No, because it's just something that always, I don't know, is kind of a red flag for me when people are having that, okay, it was an emphasis block now, so it's not extraordinarily high. I think 26 sets is absolutely reasonable if you are focusing on one particular body group. But when people are talking about really high extensive amounts of volume, always, I don't know, that makes me a little bit skeptical. And for me personally, I've been there myself, right? I think I've talked about it a couple of times already, where I've done sessions and weeks where I've done 7 sets per exercise. Yeah, and that was crazy, like 35 sets for back and chest and all these kind of things at the same time, right? And I can say for certain that my execution and my form wasn't really on point, and now I reduced it drastically because I simply can't do that anymore, because my form and execution has improved by a long shot. And because of that, it's just like something I ask, because okay, when it's that high, it could potentially be that, yeah, maybe you always want to push there, but when you're improving over time with your execution, maybe your MRV will now come down over time and is only then capping at 20 sets, with everything else staying the same in your life, in your training, in your nutrition, all these kind of things.
Yeah, that's why I think when someone hears 26 sets, it sounds shocking. And when I saw it, I was like, and then I looked into it and I was like, okay, we were only squatting once a week. Your actual number of sets of squats, I think, was only like 4 or 5, and then the rest of the volume was machine based. So, and then we weren't even doing like a heavy hip hinge or any deadlifting or any good mornings. It was all leg curls. So I think given that context and an advanced lifter, it makes a little bit more sense. Yeah. But yeah, I completely agree. I see some people getting up to those heighty amounts, and then you are a bit like, how many of those sets just felt like you were going through the motions and you were just kind of like fatigued and you were just kind of doing it? That's when you know there's junky volume coming in, when contractions aren't good. I kind of get there a little bit in my last, like quite often my last week before deloading. Some of my sets feel a bit like, I just didn't feel like I was getting much, like it just didn't feel springy. It felt a bit I like to end it before I get to that point normally, but sometimes
I have it often when I'm in my overreaching week and I'm really tired already systemically. Yeah. And I simply can't build or create that mind-muscle connection anymore, which is crazy. But yeah, I'm going in and I simply can't turn on, just as an example, my back. No matter what I'm doing, I simply can't really feel it anymore, right? And this is especially then the point where I'm just saying, okay, pushed it too far. I simply can't actually get in productive sessions anymore. And next time I'll actually have learned my lessons from this mesocycle then.
Yeah, that's why I think it's so good to be really reflective. And I really like the thought of auto-regulating and really listening to your body and that sort of thing, and starting low and slowly building. Because if you got to that point week 1, you'd be like, fuck. But if you do it like the week before your plan to deload, it's like, well, that's a lesson, that's fine. Because I've done all this good work. That was just work I didn't need to do that I can now recover from. So I think that's okay.
Totally.
Cool. We have our last question, because I was an idiot and forgot to email you all to ask for questions, so I will get them out. But we have Niklas Rausch, so our man Niklas. So he has asked, when dieting, I oftentimes experience a quite significant drop in my resting heart rate. As we know, our bodies tend to downregulate body functions such as resting heart rate, NEAT, to stay in homeostasis. So other than getting out of a calorie deficit, do you guys have any other tips or experiences to counteract this problem? Thanks, guys.
Do you want to start first, or?
Sure. I
have some thoughts, but go ahead.
This absolutely makes sense. So like Niklas is saying, our body is striving for homeostasis, so it's driving down things that burn more calories when we're in a calorie deficit. This is often why we get cold. A lot of people, it always frustrates me when people are like, oh, I'm so cold, it's because I'm so low in body fat. I'm like, so, yeah, fat insulates you. Not that to that degree. It's just because like thermogenesis, heat, burning calories, it literally makes you hot. And that's why when you're like in your massing phase, it isn't primarily because you're a fat piece of shit, because most people don't get that fat when they're in the massing phase. It's literally because the body's just like a furnace trying to burn through these calories. It's upregulating its metabolism. So when you're in a calorie deficit, downregulating metabolism, you don't burn as much. So you're just not as hot. So you get really cold, which it freaking sucks. I do not miss being perpetually cold. It's one of the worst things about dieting. So then, yeah, another one is resting heart rate. Niklas might have even seen, I posted about it on my story, how like I can track on my Fitbit, which isn't the most accurate, but it still has like a consistent measure. I think my resting heart rate dropped as low as like into the 40 beats per minute when I was in my contest prep, and then you can see it almost as like I'm building into my off season. It gets up to like 56 beats per minute and that sort of thing. And obviously other things impact your resting heart rate, but this, if you look long term and you're looking at dieting phases versus kind of massing phases, you can see the difference there. And so absolutely, I'm just confirming that Niklas is absolutely right. This is a real thing. This definitely happens. I think there's a difference between some people. I'd be really interested to see if there was a correlation between if someone was like a hyper responder in terms of when you put them into a surplus, they need more and more calories. And so that correlates with their resting heart rate. And same within a deficit, you put them in a deficit and then you have to keep creeping calories lower and lower consistently because they just down-regulate really quick, up-regulate really quick. Love to see if there was a correlation between that. Because I think between us, I'd be interested to see if you had any resting heart rate data, because I seem to respond quite opposite to them. So like I'm in surplus and I have to, like my surplus is much bigger than what you'd think it should be. And my deficit, sometimes I think I have to go lower than maybe I normally would have to. They're quite a big gap between the two. And my resting heart rate jumps by 15 beats. So in terms of counteracting it, it's just the same as any other thing that you would do to counteract it, in my opinion. Taking diet breaks, not using an excessive calorie deficit, keeping carbohydrates in there, not dieting for too long, all of the usual like things that you would try and do to counteract it. I don't think there's anything else you can particularly do. Maybe you might say don't use too much cardio, because that's going to kind of make you more endurance based. That's going to make you more efficient and lower your resting heart rate further. But I just think you can't really do anything more than the usual tools that we have. So not dieting too aggressively, not dieting for too long, taking breaks as appropriate. I think that's most of the things you can do. I don't know if you've got anything else.
Not in that regard. I think you covered it most. The only thing I was just thinking about is why is it a concern for Niklas? When it's not due to your health that there are any kind of complications going on, the resting heart rate will certainly slow down, but this is also the case when you are an endurance athlete, for example. The resting heart rate comes down because your heart gets so efficient in actually pumping the blood through your system. In that regard now, is it a concern because you fear or you are afraid of the negative adaptations from dieting? Or do you have any kind of fears of, I don't know, health consequences because of that? That is just my question I have right now. Why do you even bother to think about it, or really why do you think of it in the first place? Because for me, I mean, when I'm dieting, I don't really look at that, to be honest. I'm not taking any kind of drugs, so I don't have to take care of that either, of the blood pressure or the resting heart rate, whether it's super elevated or not, right? And when I'm dieting, it's just like a normal fact that I know that will definitely occur, and that I probably can't do anything about, because it's just a normal thing in a caloric or in a dieting scenario. So these are kind of the things where I'm just like a little bit like, okay, do you really need to think about something like that? Because there's nothing you can do about that. And all it does is causing a little bit more stress or anxiety. And you're trying to micromanage things you simply can't really control.
Yeah, to me, I wonder if I don't think it's probably coming from that place for Nicholas. He's probably just trying to get round, adaptations to dieting and hope there's something we can do to upregulate resting heart rate. But unfortunately, I don't think there is. And I think I completely agree. It's not something I monitored or tracked. It was more so something I saw in hindsight, how it's just interesting to see it. And I reckon it correlates with massing and with dieting. And I think you're completely right in that it's similar to people who, I don't know, wake up and measure their blood glucose and stuff, and they're trying to control things on a minute by minute basis. And it's kind of like, you can't really do that. It's more like, you're going to be more like, if you're lifting and you're low body fat or a decent low body fat, you're going to be insulin sensitive. If you're in a deficit, even more so, that sort of thing. It's kind of like you're looking at data that you already know. Like, you don't need to think about that. Just don't.
Yeah. It's just like collecting data for the sake of collecting data without any kind of context behind it, without any kind of value that you can make use of that data in the future. Because it's like, yeah, okay, I have my resting heart rate there, but what can I do with that now? Yeah, nothing really, right? I mean, it's just like, yeah, that was probably going to happen, and now I have the data and I can't manipulate it to my benefit or so, right? Because it's not a variable that you actually can manipulate to that extent that it will have somewhat benefits or detriments to you.
No, brilliant. That is the last question we had come through. However, we have about 20 minutes left. We're at 41 minutes. I did get asked to do a post on this, and I may well still do a post on it, because I thought it was quite a cool little post, potentially, which was basically, but I think it'll be worth discussing, and I think it'll be good to hear your thoughts on it as well. And I haven't fully thought this through either. Someone basically asked me, like, what are my thoughts on decline bench pressing for hypertrophy? And then I gave my opinion, and they're like, oh, awesome, that's exactly what I thought. I see so many people doing it and recommending it to hit the chest from all angles, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah. And then he was like, could you do a post on exercises that you think don't hold much value? Because I see so many people posting what exercises they do like, do enjoy. I'd love to see you talk about what exercises potentially you don't recommend. So I thought that might be something we could discuss, and then maybe I can do a post later on Instagram as well. So
can you just share with the audience and with myself what you actually answer to that individual?
Absolutely. So for me, it's funny, some people love decline bench pressing, and I never completely understand why. Only because for me, the chest, in terms of development, no one really needs more lower chest from what I've seen. Everyone can do with more upper chest generally, apart from Arnold Schwarzenegger in his heyday. Fucking ridiculous. Upper chest.
Crazy. Or Surge.
Yeah, oh, fuck Surge.
Holy shit.
And then the lower chest gets hit nicely when we do normal bench pressing, especially if you use a bit of an arch, you get a decent amount of lower chest right there. So I prefer to spend my time and efforts incline and flat barbell bench pressing, which has a little bit of a decline in it anyway. And then if you're doing something like dips now and then, you're getting some lower chest there. I just think it's an area of your physique that gets hit from other things that you're doing, so you don't need to worry about it. And quite often when people decline bench press, it's awkward to set up. You probably need a spotter on it, and you can quite often use a lot of weight, and that's cool, but it probably fatigues you a lot. So like the fatigue to stimulus ratio is probably a bit shit for it. So yeah, that was my thoughts on it anyway.
Yeah, no, these are my thoughts as well. And I'm a little bit biased because, to be honest, I have never ever in my life declined bench because exactly of the reasons. Awkward. Yeah, the reasons you just named. And for me, it was just like, sorry if I offend anyone, but it's just like a super bro-ish, idiotic movement to me. I don't know what it is, but whenever I see someone doing the decline, I just think like, okay, mate, you have no idea why you're doing it. You're probably only doing it because you can use a little bit more weight than on a usual bench setup. But then I would like to actually make also the argument that probably when you have a proper arch in your setup, you have actually that declined position with the upper body and your scapula and all that kind of stuff aligned. So actually, when you have a true and good setup on the bench, you're probably really close to that decline setup in a much safer position, in a much stronger position, because you are actually really stable. You can use a little bit of leg drive, all these kind of things, right? You don't necessarily need a spotter. So because of these reasons, it never was clear to me why I should use a decline bench.
I've done it before when I didn't know better, really, and it's just so awkward. Yes, always.
But you got a good chest, so probably that was the reason for it.
One I want you to go over, Pascal, because I think you're quite good at this, and this is probably more than decline pressing, the one that annoys me, because we have a lot of squat racks in the gym, which are like, they have like you can remove like what are they called? The pins. Yeah. But then it has like pins below. Yeah. And then people just fucking smash them with rack pulls. And I'm just like, their range of motion is so small. And they just look like they're just like humping the bar like with this tiny little pulse. And I'm just like, you're using... And then they leave all the weights there. So yeah, can you go over rack pulls? Because I think this is probably in our list.
Oh, God, it's crazy because that discussion... I feel like that there are certain exercises and certain diets people are really emotionally attached to. And rack pulls, people get separated on them, like massively. And even in the quote-unquote science-based community, there is such a huge discrepancy between the opinions of that one. But I'm not a big fan of that. I think that the reward of rack pulls are simply not worth the overall stress it provides to the body. And what I mean by that is you're not going through full range of motion. You're using so much load that systemically, from an axial loading perspective, but also from a peripheral nervous system perspective and central nervous perspective as well, because it is the axial loading, causes such high stress for basically nothing really. And then people always make the argumentation of, yeah, but Alpha Destiny made the video about power shrugs and his traps actually grew quite well, right? And I mean, I'm not saying anything. I just wanted to say something, but I'm not judgmental here. I was just like in the flow, and I'm not actually judgmental what other people are doing or promoting. But anyway, in regards to the outcome, what you get out of that exercise and the risk that is coming with that, I think there's no point in doing so. When you want to build your lower erectors, there are other better exercises to do so. If you want to build your traps, why do these, I don't know, humbling the bar kind of movements with power shrugs that is then kind of really ripping your upper body down and all that kind of stuff that is just like causing a high level of overall fatigue. And yes, people will always say something to you like, for him it worked, or for me it works as well. It doesn't really cause that much of stress and stuff like that. And these power shrugs really did work for me, right? Maybe that may very well be the case, but maybe also you're causing damage that you're not seeing right now that will come in the future, right? You can always make that contra on that argumentation of them from, yeah, it works for me, yeah, but maybe it is causing damage that you're simply not aware of, right? And I mean, for bodybuilding, what we are trying to achieve here is not a short-term outcome, it is longevity. Right, and in that regard, just watch the Ronnie Coleman documentary. I think that Jay Cutler did such a great point there. Like, okay, body is now Ronnie is the greatest bodybuilder of all time, but did he train smart to achieve that, was it really necessary the way he trained to actually achieve that? Could he have achieved that with somewhat of a different type of training style? Right? And this is something I think that, yes, we are not as strong as Ronnie, and yes, we don't have the genetics as Ronnie, but still, we should probably also think about these kind of things when you want to be healthy. And I'm not just speaking about you as an athlete, but in general, healthy later in your life. Because, mate, my hip is fucked up, and probably I'm going to need surgery at some point, right? And the way I trained in the past only accelerated that and degraded my joints. Do I like that now? No, it sucks. And I will probably hate that when I'm older, because then it's chronic pain. Right? And if you can avoid that, you should take care of that.
No, I don't have much to add to that. I thought that was well said. And it's funny you brought up, I think it may have been Mike who I was speaking to about the Ronnie documentary. And he said Jay Cutler basically got to Ronnie's size at like when he won. He was basically at the same size as Ronnie, maybe not quite as impressive. He probably didn't have the great muscle bellies and everything. But he was basically the same size. And look at Jay Cutler now. He's in damn good shape, and he's like he seems like pretty good. So unfortunately, Ronnie I think there's some lessons we can take away from it, and nothing to take away from Ronnie. And he doesn't. He also is happy with what he did, but I think there's lessons to take away from that. And especially for me, for most people that do rack pulls, especially Gen Pop, or even a lot of people that aren't even Gen Pop, and they really are bodybuilders, I'm not sure they've really thought it through much. And when you do sit down and analyze it, I don't think there's many ways in which I would have a strong rationale for it. I'm sure people could give me some scenarios in which it makes sense and good. I'm glad they have something that makes sense, but most of the time it doesn't.
I just think that when you can get the same results with less risk, I simply don't get the reasoning behind that. Is it really just an ego thing? Because obviously it is then.
That's how I see it.
Otherwise, you can't really make an argumentation for that.
Next one I have is front raises. So for the anterior deltoids, just simply like the lower chest, but even worse than doing decline, I think, is doing a front raise, just because the anterior deltoids get smashed when you barbell like any pressing movement, they get absolutely smashed. No one ever has lagging anterior deltoids. I haven't seen one physique. I don't think anyone needs to do any anterior deltoid work. So that is a big one for me.
Totally. I know I've done it in the past. So when I began training,
I did such stupid anterior deltoid.
So often, and way too heavy, right? Like really swinging up and hip thrusting the weights up to the point, right? But yeah, you said it right well there, that no one has lagging anterior delts. And I mean, I've never actually seen a physique where I was just like, holy shit, he has some really good looking anterior delts. No, the other way around. Either the side delts or the rear delts.
Yeah.
So actually really just focus on that, and you are probably more covered aesthetically than just swinging the weights up and trying to get impressive anterior delts, because...
Again, I think it's people doing it don't know what they're doing. That's simply it. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. I don't think anyone who knows what they're doing programs them. From what I know, again, equally people can comment and say we're wrong. Fine, because I should have said this at the start of this. You can always make a case for an exercise. I'm absolutely sure of it. So these are just ones we commonly see done for hypertrophy that probably shouldn't be.
And then, absolutely. And I just want to make it clear with the rack pulls and stuff like that, because I know that there are people probably, when they're listening to this, they disagree with us, and that's absolutely fine. You can actually put that into the comment section. But when it comes to a huge discussion, I have participated in like 2 or 3 like massive discussions about it, and it was never fruitful. So there was a discussion around it on one of our podcast episodes with Mike as well, right? Huge discussion around that. So there were so many people jumping on that topic actually talking about that. And it was a back and forth, and no one was willing to listen to the other one, right? And the same applies to, I think that even that was Mike as well, who posted that on Facebook once, his opinions on rag pulls. So many people jumped on it, just like basically in short term said that he is absolutely wrong, that he doesn't know what he's talking about, that rag pulls work for them, etc., and then that they know a lot of people that they work for as well, and Alpha Destiny, and then in our Facebook group as well, right? And I'm kind of, and that's not me being or wanting to avoid getting into discussions anymore, but it doesn't lead to a fruitful outcome, or to an outcome where both parties are like, yeah, I see your point, blah, blah, right? And we can agree that we may disagree, or yeah, I see your point, maybe I should reevaluate or rethink my belief on that matter, and never turns out like that. And I'm just a little bit sick and tired of that continuous discussion. I have my thoughts on the matter, and I probably won't change that unless there's a really good literature and also good anecdotal experiences in conjunction with each other that then proves me wrong and convinces me to change my beliefs. But until that point, I'm probably not going to change my stance. And I think that is absolutely a legit way to go about things. When there's enough evidence presented to you, then it's absolutely right to admit that you've been wrong in the past and to change your views on things. But up until that point, I stand to my words.
No, well said. And now no one's going to comment now. They're just going to be like, oh, fuck it. I don't know other exercises spring to mind. I don't know if any other exercises spring to mind for you. I have like a generic, all-encompassing thing to say about some exercises, but I don't have anything that springs to mind.
Oh, God, I don't know. Probably whenever you're going to the gym, you will see something that is just like, oh shit, I wanted to talk about that. But right now, I'm not entirely certain. Just like most of the time, just the range of motion on many exercises, and just like going through half rate. So it is not even just one of the two things where you're just like half repping everything, but it's more so you're half repping things and you're not having a mind muscle connection at the same time. It's just like, yeah, so done, right? And it's just, well, mate, I've been there. So I'll actually admit that as well, that mate, I've done these mistakes and it's absolutely fine. I'm not just pointing fingers at other people, but I'm pointing them towards myself as well.
Yeah. So
but yeah.
My all-encompassing thing probably encompasses that a little bit, in that it's just, well, actually, I guess, yeah, anything done through a shortened range of motion to maximize weight on the bar just for your ego, basically, for hypertrophy is pointless. Don't do that. And then the only other thing I'd say is like Instagram, fit chicks, those exercises, and you know what I mean, like the whatever they might be, like high rep, I don't know, just lots of like basically not enough overload to provide any stress, and just trying to get a pump all the time. I think a good thing
you can always ask yourself is basically this: would you, when you're recording that set of the exercise, post that on social media and be absolutely fine with that? And if you can't really say yes, then you probably should reevaluate your form and execution.
Yeah. What are the fit chick exercises that we see? I'm trying to think of what they are. The
kickbacks. So donkey kickbacks with cables attached to one of their feet. Then,
which basically are just too awkward to really do much. Like they're just an awkward setup. I think a machine might work.
Then the Stairmaster, maybe squats or kickbacks there as well.
Have you ever seen that? Oh my god!
Yeah, on the Stairmaster. Like, and then also sidewalks on the Stairmaster upwards. It's just like,
what are those, like curtsy lunges or something? They're fucking.
What is that?
Like where you kind of cross you lunge to the side and cross your legs at the same time. Someone was doing those today in the gym.
Yeah, totally.
I know. Like, how can you even put any? Like the stabilization, there's like it's doing stuff on bozo balls, stuff like that. No stabilization, so you can actually have any force production, create overload.
No, absolutely.
I really want the one on the, what was it that Harry was saying on the assisted pull-up machine? like doing like
push
downs.
Wasn't it triceps?
I said triceps on the kind of assisted dip machine, or like I think he was saying like with your leg and pushing down on it.
Yeah, like step ups basically. Yeah.
Cool. I think that probably wraps everything up. We're at 59 minutes now, so we're all good. We're at an hour.
If people are still listening, thank you very much for.
Hopefully, this has been entertaining.
The past 20 minutes for just us ranting and rambling all the time. So yeah, thank you very much for that. And other than that, do you have anything else you wanted to throw out there, Steve?
No. Did we tell everyone last time we had apparel available now?
We did.
Cool. So thank you for your orders, because we had a couple of orders. So hopefully when you do get it, we're really excited to see you wearing it. So definitely tag us in this video as well. Like if you're watching this, as always, take a photo, tag us, let us share that around. We love it when you listen to us. We really appreciate the support. Apart from that, I don't think there's anything major that we need to share with our audience at the moment.
Absolutely. Cool.
Sweet. Cheers, guys. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you soon.
Cheers.